3 days after my son-in-law humiliated me for counting pennies at the grocery store, I held a lottery ticket worth $7 million. But this isn't a story about revenge. It's about something much more powerful, the healing that can happen when a family learns to see each other with new eyes. My name is Margaret Chen, and at 68, I've learned that dignity isn't something you can lose unless you choose to give it away. But 3 months ago, I almost forgot that lesson entirely. It was a Tuesday afternoon at Miller's Grocery, the same store where I'd shopped for 37 years. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I stood at checkout lane 3, methodically counting out exact change from my small coin purse. $73.46 for my weekly groceries. Every penny accounted for, just as my late husband Thomas had taught me. Behind me in line stood my daughter Sarah and her husband Derek. They'd offered to drive me to the store, which I'd initially appreciated. Sarah is my only child, 34 years old, with her father's gentle eyes, but lately, something harder around the edges. Derek is a different story entirely. Seriously? Derek's voice cut through the store's ambient noise. We're going to stand here while she counts out pennies like some homeless person? The words hit me like a physical blow. My hands, weathered from years of working as a seamstress, trembled slightly as I continued counting. The young cashier, probably someone's granddaughter, gave me an apologetic smile. "Mom, maybe we could just..." Sarah started, but she trailed off. She didn't defend me. She didn't tell her husband that his words were cruel. She just stood there, embarrassment flushing her cheeks. Derek continued, his voice carrying to other shoppers. "I mean, come on. It's embarrassing. Sarah, can't you just pay for her groceries? This is ridiculous." I felt every pair of eyes in our vicinity turn toward me. The elderly man behind Derek shook his head in disapproval, but not at me, at the young man who thought counting change was beneath dignity. "It's fine," I said quietly to the cashier, placing the last quarter on the counter. "Thank you, dear." As we walked to the car, Derek's commentary continued. "I don't understand why you insist on living like you're destitute, Margaret. Sarah tells me you have money saved. Why this whole penny-pinching act?" I stopped walking. Sarah bumped into me, caught off guard. "It's not an act, Derek," I said, turning to face him. "It's called being careful with money. It's called remembering that every dollar has value. It's called not taking things for granted." He laughed, actually laughed. "Right. Well, maybe when you decide to join the 21st century, you'll understand that some of us have better things to do than count pennies." That night, I sat in my small but tidy living room, the same one where Thomas and I had raised Sarah, where we'd celebrated birthdays and Christmas mornings, where we'd held each other through his final illness. The house was quiet except for the tick of the mantel clock he'd given me for our 20th anniversary. Derek's words echoed in my mind, but they weren't the first of their kind. Over the 2 years since Sarah had married him, I'd watched my relationship with my daughter change. Derek worked in tech sales, made good money, and seemed to believe that financial success meant he could look down on those who were more careful with their resources. Sarah had been different before Derek. She used to call me every Sunday, visit twice a week, ask my advice about everything from recipes to relationships. But gradually, those calls became shorter, the visits less frequent. When I'd express an opinion that differed from Derek's, Sarah would grow uncomfortable, caught between loyalty to her mother and peace in her marriage. I wasn't poor, not really. Thomas had been a good provider, and his life insurance, combined with my social security and modest savings, kept me comfortable. But comfort and wealth are different things, and I'd lived through enough lean years to know the value of watching every expense. Derek saw my careful budgeting as embarrassing. To him, my Sunday coupons and price comparisons weren't wisdom earned through experience. They were shameful reminders of a poverty mindset he couldn't understand. I pulled out my weekly lottery ticket, purchased faithfully every Tuesday for the past 5 years. Not because I expected to win, but because sometimes hope costs $2, and that felt like a reasonable price to pay. Thomas and I had always played the same numbers. Our anniversary date, Sarah's birthday, and a combination that spelled out love on the keypad. It was silly, perhaps, but it was our silly tradition, and I kept it alive even after he was gone. As I tucked the ticket into my jewelry box next to my wedding ring, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. I just had no idea how dramatically. Friday evening arrived gray and drizzly. I was in my kitchen, preparing a simple dinner of chicken soup and cornbread, when the lottery drawing came on television. Usually, I'd just check my numbers in the newspaper the next morning, but something compelled me to watch. The host, a cheerful woman in a blue blazer, announced the numbers with practiced enthusiasm. Tonight's jackpot is $7 million. Let's see tonight's winning numbers. I retrieved my ticket from the jewelry box, settling into Thomas's old recliner with my reading glasses perched on my nose. First Noah, 7. I glanced at my ticket. 7. Our anniversary month. 14. Sarah's birthday. My heart began to beat a little faster. 22. That was on my ticket too. I sat up straighter. 36, 41. Both numbers matched. My hands began to shake. And the final number, 57. I stared at my ticket, then at the television screen. I looked again, counting each number twice, then 3 times. Every single number matched. $7 million. I sat in that chair for over an hour, ticket clutched in my trembling hands, trying to process what had just happened. $7 million. More money than I'd ever dreamed of having. More money than Derek made in several years. More money than would change not just my life, but potentially the lives of everyone in my family. My first instinct was to call Sarah, to share this incredible news with the person who should be closest to me. But something held me back. Maybe it was the memory of Derek's cruel words at the grocery store. Maybe it was the way Sarah had stood silently by while her husband humiliated me. Or maybe it was wisdom, the kind that comes from years of watching how money changes people, how suddenly having it reveals character in ways both beautiful and ugly. I decided to wait, not out of spite, but out of curiosity. What would happen if I kept this secret for a while? How would my family treat me when they thought I was still the penny-counting woman Derek had mocked? The next morning, I called the lottery office and arranged to claim my prize. The process would take a few weeks, they explained, but I could rest assured that the money was real and would soon be mine. I chose the lump sum option, roughly $4 million after taxes. Still more money than I could spend in several lifetimes. I maintained my routine exactly as before. Weekly grocery shopping with my coupons, careful budgeting, the same modest lifestyle I'd always lived. But now I watched my family with different eyes, studying their behavior like a scientist observing an experiment. The Tuesday after my win, Sarah called with an invitation to dinner. Derek's parents are coming to town, she said. We thought it might be nice if you joined us. I agreed, curious about how the evening would unfold. Derek's parents, Jim and Patricia, were pleasant enough people, successful in their own right. Jim had owned a chain of auto parts stores before retiring, and Patricia had been a nurse administrator. They were polite to me, but I sensed Derek had prepared them to see me as Sarah's embarrassing, penny-pinching mother. During dinner, the conversation turned to investments and financial planning. Derek held forth about his portfolio, his real estate investments, his plans for early retirement. You should really talk to Mom about financial planning, Derek said to Sarah, loud enough for everyone to hear. I mean, at her age, she should have better strategies than counting change at grocery stores. Patricia looked uncomfortable. Jim cleared his throat, but Sarah said nothing. I smiled pleasantly. I appreciate your concern, Derek. I'm actually quite comfortable with my financial situation. He laughed, that same dismissive laugh I remembered from the grocery store. Right? Well, if you ever want to learn about real investing instead of hiding money under your mattress, let me know. Derek, Sarah said quietly, finally showing a flicker of discomfort. What? I'm trying to help. Margaret, you could be living so much better if you just trust someone who actually understands money. I excused myself to help Sarah clear the table, leaving Derek to continue his financial wisdom lecture to his parents. In the kitchen, Sarah looked troubled. Mom, I'm sorry about, About what, honey? Derek can be intense about money stuff. He doesn't mean to be condescending. I studied my daughter's face. Doesn't he? She couldn't meet my eyes. He grew up differently than we did. He's just trying to help. And what do you think, Sarah? Do you think I need his help? She hesitated, and in that hesitation, I saw everything I needed to know. I want you to be comfortable, Mom. Maybe Derek has some good ideas. That night, I lay awake thinking about the woman who had raised my daughter. The woman who had stretched every dollar to make sure Sarah had piano lessons and summer camp and the college education that led to her successful career as a graphic designer. That woman had somehow become an embarrassment to her own child. Over the next 2 weeks, I found myself conducting what I privately called the test. Not out of malice, but from a genuine desire to understand where I stood with the people I loved most. I called Sarah with a made-up story about needing help with a sudden expense. My water heater had supposedly failed, and I needed $1,200 for repairs. I could have afforded it easily even before the lottery win, but I wanted to see how she would respond. "Oh, Mom," she said, genuine concern in her voice. "That's terrible timing. Derek and I just put a down payment on a new car. Let me talk to him and see what we can do." She called back 2 hours later. "We can help with about $300 right now, and maybe the rest next month." Derek suggested you might want to look into a personal loan for the difference. $300. When Derek had spent more than that on a single dinner with clients just last week, according to Sarah's own social media posts. I told her I'd figured something else out, not wanting to burden them, but the number stayed with me. $300 was what their financial help was worth. A few days later, I mentioned to Sarah that I was thinking about selling some of my jewelry, pieces that had been my mother's, items with both monetary and sentimental value. "Oh, Mom, you don't have to do that," Sarah said quickly. "Maybe we could help you set up a budget." Derek's really good with financial planning. Again, Derek's expertise was offered. Again, no actual financial assistance. But it was the Sunday visit that really opened my eyes. Sarah and Derek came by for what had once been our weekly tradition, coffee and conversation in my small backyard garden. Thomas had planted that garden for me 30 years ago, and I'd maintained it lovingly ever since. Derek spent most of the visit on his phone, taking calls and checking emails. When he finally put it away, he looked around the yard with obvious disdain. "You know, Margaret, this place is good bones. With some serious renovation, you could probably get a decent price for it. Maybe move into one of those senior communities." I looked at my roses, the ones Thomas had planted for our anniversary every year. "I like my home, Derek." "Sure, but be practical. This house is too big for one person. The maintenance costs must be killing you. And frankly, the neighborhood's gone downhill." Sarah shifted uncomfortably. The neighborhood was actually quite nice. Solid middle-class families, well-maintained homes, the kind of place where neighbors still knew each other's names. "Derek," Sarah said quietly. "What?" "I'm being honest. Margaret, you're wasting money on this place when you could be living somewhere designed for seniors, with activities and meal plans and medical care nearby." "I'm 68, not 98, I said, "and I'm perfectly capable of maintaining my own home." He shrugged. "For now, but let's be realistic about the future." As they prepared to leave, Derek made one final observation. "You know what your problem is, Margaret? You're stuck in the past. Thomas is gone. Sorry to be blunt, but it's true. You can't live like he's coming back. You need to modernize your thinking about money, about life, about everything." After they left, I sat in my garden and wept, not from sadness, but from a mixture of anger and disappointment that cut deeper than any financial struggle I'd ever faced. These weren't tears of self-pity, they were tears of recognition. I was finally seeing clearly how little respect I commanded in my own family. 3 weeks after my lottery win, the check arrived. $7 million, minus taxes, deposited into a new account I'd opened specifically for this purpose. I stared at the bank statement for a long time, still hardly believing it was real. That same day, Derek called. Not Sarah, but Derek himself, which was unusual. "Hey, Margaret, I've been thinking about our conversation last Sunday. I might have come across as a little harsh about your financial situation." "A little harsh." That was one way to put it. "I appreciate that, Derek. The thing is, I've been talking to some colleagues about retirement planning for people in your situation, and I think I could really help you maximize what you have. Maybe we could sit down this weekend and go over your finances? I could set up a proper portfolio for you." I almost laughed. Now that he'd decided I needed his help, he was eager to provide it. "That's very kind of you to offer." "Great. How about Saturday afternoon? I'll bring my laptop, and we can really dig into your situation. Trust me, Margaret, by the time we're done, you'll be amazed at what we can accomplish." Saturday arrived, and with it came Derek, armed with charts and spreadsheets and the confident demeanor of a man about to solve all my problems. Sarah came too, looking relieved that her husband was finally going to fix her mother's financial situation. We sat in my living room, the same room where Thomas and I had made every major decision of our married life, where we'd planned for Sarah's education and our retirement, where we'd held each other through financial struggles and celebrated modest successes. Derek opened his laptop and pulled out a legal pad. Okay, Margaret, let's start with the basics. What are your monthly expenses, and what's your total assets picture? I pretended to consider the question. Well, that's interesting timing, Derek. I was actually going to share some news with you both today. Sarah looked up from her phone. What kind of news, Mom? I reached into my purse and pulled out the lottery ticket. The same ticket I'd bought that Tuesday after Derek's humiliation at the grocery store. 3 weeks ago, this ticket won the lottery. $7 million. The silence that followed was profound. Derek's pen froze halfway through writing something on his legal pad. Sarah's mouth fell open. I'm sorry, what? Derek said finally. I won $7 million in the lottery. After taxes, it's about $4 million. It's already in the bank. Sarah found her voice first. Mom, are you serious? Is this real? I showed them the bank statement I'd printed that morning. Derek took it with shaking hands, staring at the numbers as if they might change if he looked away. For $1 million, he whispered. For $1 million, $6 million, to be exact, I said calmly. What happened next was like watching actors suddenly realize they were in the wrong play. Derek's entire demeanor shifted. The condescending financial advisor disappeared, replaced by someone who looked like he'd been struck by lightning. Margaret, this is incredible. Congratulations. This changes everything. Does it? I asked. Well, of course. I mean, we need to talk about investment strategies immediately. This kind of money requires serious financial planning. Lucky thing you have someone in the family who understands these matters. Sarah was crying. Tears of joy, she said, though I wondered if they might also be tears of something else. Realization, perhaps. Mom, why didn't you tell us sooner? I looked at my daughter, this woman I'd raised to be kind and honest and strong. I wanted to see how you both treated me when you thought I was still the embarrassing penny counter from grocery store. The room fell silent again. The silence after my words was heavy. Derek shifted in his chair, his face pale, his jaw tight. For once, the man who always had something to say had nothing. I let the quiet stretch until the ticking of Thomas's clock was the only sound in the room. Then I spoke again, slower this time, each word sharp enough to cut. You mocked me for pennies, Derek. You thought that made you bigger than me. But now you know the truth. I could buy and sell your entire portfolio 10 times over, and I wouldn't even feel it. Do you understand what that means? His mouth opened, but no words came out. You treated me like a beggar, I continued. But you're the one begging now, for a place at this table, for access to my money. And here's the part you'll never forget. You will not see a single cent of it. Sarah gasped. Derek's head snapped up. Margaret, you can't be serious. I'm deadly serious, I said, my voice low but firm. You laughed at me in public. You belittled me in my own home. You made my daughter ashamed of the mother who gave her everything. And now you want me to hand you the key to a fortune you don't deserve. Derek leaned forward, his tone suddenly pleading. I was wrong. I see that now. But money like this, it needs to be managed properly. I can help you. I held up my hand. You've helped enough. I turned to Sarah. And you, my daughter, the one person I thought would always stand beside me. You chose silence. You chose comfort over courage. And that choice will cost you more than you realize. Sarah's tears spilled over. Mom, please, I didn't answer. Not yet. I let Sarah's plea hang in the air, her voice trembling, her eyes red with regret. For a brief second, I almost softened. Almost. But then Derek shifted again, and I saw that glimmer in his eyes. Not remorse, not humility, but calculation. He was already figuring out another angle, another way to get his hands on what wasn't his. That was all I needed to remember. Sit down, I said sharply, pointing at him before he could rise from the couch. You wanted to play financial advisor? Fine. Let's run the numbers. His brows knitted in confusion. What? You came here with your laptop, your charts, your so-called expertise. You came here ready to dissect my life like I was one of your desperate clients begging for scraps of advice. So let's do it. But this time, Derek, we're going to talk about your numbers, not mine. He blinked, caught off guard. My numbers. Yes, I said coldly. How much is in your savings account right now? Don't bother lying. Sarah has already told me you live month to month despite all that big talk about investments. Sarah flinched, her face pale. Derek's lips tightened. That's none of your business. Oh, but it is, I said, my voice rising for the first time. Because 2 weeks ago you mocked me in front of strangers at the grocery store. waving around your arrogance as if money gave you character. You called me a homeless person. You made your wife, my daughter, ashamed of me. And you thought you could get away with it because you assumed I was powerless. You thought I was beneath you. The words echoed in the room, sharp and cutting. Derek shifted again, his hands clenching into fists. I didn't mean it like that. You meant it exactly like that, I snapped. And now, you're sitting here in my home, staring at numbers you'll never see in your lifetime, and it's eating you alive. He swallowed hard. His voice was lower now, stripped of its usual bravado. Margaret, don't you dare call me by my name like we're equals. I cut in. You lost that privilege the day you humiliated me. You'll address me with the respect you denied me all these years. Do you understand? His mouth worked silently. Sarah sat frozen, her tears spilling freely. You built your identity on mocking others, I continued, on inflating your ego at the expense of everyone around you. But let me tell you something, Derek, money doesn't expose character, it magnifies it. And what I see in you is small, pathetic, and desperate. I walked slowly to the table where Thomas's clock ticked on, steady and unbothered. I lifted the bank statement again, letting the light catch the numbers printed in neat black ink. $4,600,000. This is mine, I said, my voice low and steady. Not yours. Not Sarah's. Not anyone else's. Mine. And I will make sure every last cent of it is shielded from your greedy hands. Derek shot to his feet, his composure cracking. You can't cut Sarah off like that. She's your daughter. This affects her too. I turned on him, my eyes blazing. No, Derek. What affects Sarah is the choice she made when she stood by while you tore me down. She could have stopped you. She could have defended me. Instead, she chose silence. That was her decision. And now, she will live with it. Sarah let out a sob. Mom, please, don't do this. Don't beg me, Sarah, I said sharply. I begged life for years when your father was dying in that hospital bed. I begged for more time, more strength, more courage. I gave everything I had to raise you, to make sure you never went without. And now I'm done begging. I am not your safety net. I am not your embarrassment. I am not your silent victim. Derek's face was flushed, his hands trembling with barely contained rage. You're making a mistake, he spat. Money like that, without proper guidance, it'll ruin you. I laughed. A short, sharp sound that made him flinch. Ruin me? Derek, I survived lean years with nothing but a sewing machine and determination. I raised a child on pennies and prayers. I buried the love of my life and still managed to keep this house standing. You think money can ruin me? No, Derek. Money ruins men like you. Men who can't stand not being in control. Men who need wealth to feel important. I stepped closer, my voice dropping to a whisper, so sharp it cut deeper than a scream. You can posture all you want, but the truth is simple. I own the one thing you'll never have. Self-respect. And that, Derek, makes me richer than you'll ever be. The room was silent except for Sarah's sobs. Derek opened his mouth, then closed it again. For once, the salesman had no pitch, no comeback, no slick words to cover his shame. I straightened my shoulders, holding the bank statement in one hand and the lottery ticket in the other. From this day forward, Derek, you will not speak to me about money. You will not mock me. You will not patronize me. And you will not expect a single dollar from me. Do you understand? His silence was answer enough. And Sarah, I said, turning to her. Her face was streaked with tears, her hands trembling in her lap. I will always love you. You are my daughter. But love does not erase cowardice. You stood by while I was humiliated. You watched and said nothing. You'll need to decide whether you want to continue down that path, or whether you want to reclaim the integrity I know is buried somewhere inside you. She nodded through her tears, but I didn't soften. Not this time. I folded the bank statement neatly, slid the lottery ticket back into my purse, and turned toward the door. This conversation is over, I said coldly. And so is your hold over me. I left them sitting in stunned silence, the sound of Thomas's clock marking each second of their shame. That night, I sat alone in my garden, Thomas's roses glowing faintly under the porch light. The same garden Derek once dismissed as wasted money. I ran my fingers over the petals, soft and defiant, and for the first time in years I felt a calm power settle inside me. I thought about Sarah's tears, about Derek's stammering silence, about the way their faces collapsed when they realized I wasn't the woman they thought I was. They had seen me as weak, as old, as easy to dismiss. But money hadn't changed me. It had simply given me the chance to show them who I really was. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their pity. And I certainly didn't need their company. The lottery ticket still sat in my purse, folded neatly beside Thomas's wedding band. To anyone else, it was a piece of paper worth millions. To me, it was a reminder. The reminder that dignity isn't granted by others. It's claimed. And once claimed, it can't be taken away. The next morning, I went to the bank and moved the bulk of my winnings into a private trust. One that neither Derek nor Sarah would ever have access to. I made sure of that. If my daughter wanted to rebuild what was broken, she would have to do it with honesty, not expectation. As for Derek, he would have to live with the knowledge that the woman he mocked for pennies now had more wealth than he'd ever touch, and that not 1 cent of it would ever be his. It was a revenge no insult of his could ever undo. I poured myself a cup of tea that evening and sat back down in my recliner, Thomas's clock ticking beside me. The world outside carried on as usual, neighbors walking dogs, children riding bikes, the hum of distant traffic. But inside my house, inside my heart, everything had shifted. They had underestimated me. They would never make that mistake again. And if Derek ever forgot the lesson, I'd be ready. Because some debts aren't paid in money. They're paid in silence, in exclusion, in the icy knowledge that you're on the outside looking in. I sipped my tea, a smile tugging at my lips. For years, I'd been counting pennies. Now, I was counting something far sweeter. Every second Derek would spend knowing he had mocked the wrong woman. The roses swayed gently in the night air, and I whispered to Thomas's memory. They thought they could bury me in shame, but I was planting seeds for revenge.